Hello, thank you for being here with us in this conversation about managing anxiety when teaching. My name is Ana Bádue. I am a fellow at the Teaching and Learning Center at the Graduate Center.
And I'm Annalise Caviasco. I'm a clinical fellow at the Student Counseling Center and Wellness Center.
So Annalise and I put together in November last year a workshop to work with that, and it was a partnership between the Wellness Center and the Teaching and Learning Center, which is great. And we talked about some of the reasons why we get stressed or anxious or sometimes even depressed before we teach and some of strategies to cope with that. So here we're going to talk a little bit about it. So the first thing we like to ask folks is, what do you think, if we're going to pause a minute to think, like, what do you think that are the main reasons that make you fear teaching or make you anxious? And when we asked this to participants last year in an anonymous way, many people said they were afraid of not being perceived as an authority, or not knowing enough, or for example, when asked a question that they didn't know the answer, or the students not respecting them. Usually international students are also concerned with maybe racial dynamics in the classroom or some types of differences, like how do I know their context, their background that we don't share. And we thought of asking you a second question. So first, like in terms of the spheres, what they are, and the second would be, one of the participants said they were really afraid, like I said, of being asked a question and not knowing what to do. So what would you do if it was you? What would you say to this person if they were afraid of that? And if we think of that, we can put ourselves in perspective. So now I'll pass it on to Annalise.
Great, yeah. And I'll be talking about some of the ways that anxiety might show up in the classroom or when we're preparing to teach. So this is just a slide that we had as part of the workshop, and some of the ways that anxiety can show up for graduate student teachers is a number of things, and there are some others I'm sure that are not on this list that you can probably think of that might show up for you as well. But some common ways that anxiety does show up in teaching for folks, especially new teachers and graduate student teachers, is procrastinating the preparation of course material. So kind of putting it off because doing it does bring up feelings of anxiety or worry. So it's hard to even really sit down and start working on preparing slides or grading. Avoiding difficult conversations with students, or if you know that you have to maybe have a hard conversation or disappointing conversation for a student, really trying to put that off. Feeling as though we have to prepare for every single possible situation that might show up during teaching, and really putting pressure on ourselves to know it all. Feeling that we must know everything there is to know about a topic when, we know as graduate students we're also still learning. So putting that additional pressure on ourselves to know everything. Finding it hard to set boundaries with students or in the classroom. So, if you feel that you have imposter syndrome or feel like you're not an authority figure, it's hard to really behave as though you are the authority figure in the classroom, or assert your boundaries or need for respect, or grading or timing of answering emails and things like that. Sticking to topics that you feel only very comfortable with presenting, and not maybe taking the risk and presenting a new topic or something in the field that is less known or that you feel less comfortable with, or over relying on, the textbook material or a script of what you think you should say. This relates to kind of, over preparing or procrastinating. And then also fearing the worst happening. So when you're teaching, feeling like there is going to be a student who asks you a really hard question when, that might only happen a couple of times in your teaching experience, but or worrying that you won't know what to say when in reality you might actually know what to come up with if you're not sure of an answer. So we also talked about kind of the cycle of how anxiety can manifest and really why this occurs. So when we're anxious, really what that leads to is kind of avoidance. Um, and when we're afraid of something, our tendency is to kind of run away from it, which some cases can be really helpful, like if you're trying to run away from a dangerous situation. But teaching, your safety is really not what's at risk there. So that kind of tendency to avoid or run away actually ends up not really helping us in the long run. So avoiding, procrastinating, putting off a difficult conversation can give us some short-term relief from anxiety. But in the long run, if we don't really set boundaries or have hard conversations up front, or we put off preparing for teaching till, the day before or really late at night, that can actually in the long run make us more anxious. And that perfectionism piece is also part of this here, because we're being a perfectionist is really trying to avoid the possibility that something might go wrong. And we kind of think to ourselves, if we prepare for every possible scenario, then we're going to avoid kind of a bad feeling. When in reality, this perfectionism really just puts a lot of extra pressure on us. And if we continue to avoid, we never get to kind of learn and grow and see what happens when maybe we have a new conversation in the classroom or something comes up, to stretch us to learn and grow along with our students. So that's just a little bit about, how anxiety works and how it can show up in the classroom. And now I'll pass it back to Anna to kind of talk about some of the ways we cope with this anxiety.
Yes, thank you, Annalise. So it's very important what Annalise said about avoiding the fears. That's why we asked earlier, what are the fears that you think you might have? And it's very important also, in order to deal with it, is maybe to realize that if some of the things that you are afraid of, they happen, they are not going to blow up the whole learning experience. Because the other thing that we like to think is, what is the purpose of teaching? So why would you like to teach? Sometimes we have to teach because we have to, but many of us also like teaching. And if you don't like, what do you think is the purpose of teaching? So doing this exercise that teaching is about learning and not about ourselves, we can also put our anxieties in perspective or our fears in perspective. So if I'm afraid that I won't know enough and I over prepare, if the point is that the students learn, it's more important that you convey this in a way that they can understand than you've been over prepared, just in order not to deal with the bad feelings or the bad sensations that might come up with. So thinking of the purpose helps to put yourself in perspective and your fear in perspective. And the other thing that we thought of is like having these difficult conversations, as Annalise said, and not being afraid of difficult things in the classroom and trying to find ways to feel comfortable with improvising. Like she said, feeling too attached to a script. A classroom has 30 students, sometimes 100 students. So things are going to come out of the script, and it's fine, because again, the purpose is that students learn. And as students ourselves, we know that we learn sometimes even with things happen in the classroom. So do not be afraid of getting out of the script. And how to do that is maybe putting yourself in perspective, that learning is maybe more important than teaching. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And we also wanted to let people know who might be watching this that there are resources available at the Student Counseling Services and Wellness Center year round, individual support services, group services, and workshops throughout the year. And Anna also has at the TLC some services.
Yes, we do have, and not different, but one of the things that we do at the TLC when we have these conversations in groups is that you realize you're not alone in these fears. So don't feel you have to do everything you have to deal with all this by yourself. You have the Wellness Center and the Teaching and Learning Center. We offer office hours that can help you with these questions and questions about syllabus, assignments, and teaching related things in general. We have the Visible Pedagogy blog, where we post different strategies, texts in general about teaching in the CUNY context. And we also offer workshops throughout the year, similarly to the Wellness Center. And you can reach both of our websites and you see the program for the semester and the next.
Okay, thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.